I never thought the pills my daughter took every afternoon would lead to my husband being dragged out of our house in handcuffs. My name is Harper, and I work in finance here in Portland. The exhaustion was always there, but nothing compared to the silent worry I felt watching my 11-year-old daughter, Mia, fade before my eyes. Her vibrant energy had vanished, replaced by dark circles and a frightening silence. That Tuesday evening, while I was chopping vegetables for dinner, Mia shuffled into the kitchen in her fluffy pajamas. She hesitated before tugging at my blouse. Her question made my blood run cold. She wanted to stop taking the pills that the lady gave her. I put down the knife slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. What lady? What pills? Her answer punched the air from my lungs. A friend of Daddy's had been visiting while I was at the office. This woman gave Mia vitamins to help her study better, but they made her sleep all afternoon. My husband Caleb, a construction project manager I'd trusted for 10 years, told her it was our little secret. I fought to stay calm as I asked to see the bottle. It was a generic container with no label. The next morning, I took those pills to Dr. Bennett, an old friend at the downtown urgent care. Her verdict made my hands shake. Heavy benzodiazepines. Dangerous sedatives for a child. Someone was drugging my daughter. This is a story about discovering the unthinkable in your own home, and I need you with me to tell it. To make sure you hear every detail of what happened next, you can follow the stories shared here. That way, you won't miss how everything unfolded. The fury that replaced my fear was cold and calculating. I'd spent years analyzing financial data, finding patterns where others saw chaos. Now I would use those same skills to uncover what was happening in my own home. I called in sick the next day and drove to a tech store in Gresham, far enough from our neighborhood that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. The clerk barely looked up as I purchased a small wireless camera disguised as a phone charger. My hands were steady as I paid in cash. That evening, while Caleb was in the shower, I installed it on the living room shelf, positioned perfectly to capture the couch where Mia usually sat doing homework. The red recording light was invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. I went to work the next 3 days as usual, kissing Caleb goodbye each morning like nothing had changed. But my phone stayed face up on my desk, the camera app running silently in the background. I watched the empty living room for hours, my coffee growing cold as colleagues walked past my office. On Thursday afternoon, my screen suddenly showed movement. Caleb walked through our front door at 2:15, 45 minutes earlier than his usual arrival time. He wasn't alone. The woman who followed him inside looked barely out of college. She had long dark hair and wore yoga pants with an expensive-looking leather jacket. She moved through my home like she'd been there before, dropping her purse on my dining table, kicking off her shoes by my bookshelf. I watched Mia come downstairs, her backpack still on her shoulders. The woman smiled at her, reaching into her purse. Even through the phone screen, I could see Mia's hesitation before she accepted the small white pill and the glass of water Caleb handed her. My daughter swallowed it obediently, just like she'd been taught to take her vitamins every morning. 20 minutes later, Mia's head drooped against the couch cushions. The woman checked her pulse casually, like a nurse confirming a patient was sedated. Then she turned to my husband with a smile that made me want to put my fist through the screen. They didn't even wait for Mia to be fully unconscious. Caleb pulled the woman close, kissing her in my living room, while our daughter slept 3 feet away. They laughed about something I couldn't hear, pouring wine from the bottle I'd been saving for our anniversary into my favorite glasses. Then they walked upstairs to our bedroom. I sat frozen at my desk, watching the empty living room and my sleeping child. The timestamp on the recording showed 2:47 p.m. My co-workers probably wondered why I didn't move for the next hour, staring at my phone like it held the secrets of the universe. It did hold secrets, just not the kind I'd ever wanted to know. When Mia finally stirred at 4:30, sitting up slowly and rubbing her eyes in confusion, I watched Caleb come back downstairs. He was freshly showered, his hair still damp. He asked her about homework with the same patient tone he'd used since she was in kindergarten. The woman stayed upstairs, probably getting dressed in my bathroom. I saved the video file and made 3 backup copies. Then I called my lawyer, Rebecca Chen, who I'd worked with on corporate contracts. Her personal cell phone, the one she only gave to friends, rang twice before she answered. The words that came out of my mouth didn't sound like mine. I told her everything in a flat, emotionless voice, while I watched Caleb help Mia with her math homework on my phone screen. Rebecca listened without interrupting until I finished. Her first question was whether I'd kept the pills. Her second was whether I had the video evidence secured. Her third made my throat tight. She asked if I was somewhere safe. I looked around my office at the framed photos of Mia on my desk and the coffee mug Caleb had given me last Christmas. Safe felt like a word from another language, but I told her yes, and then I asked her what we do next. Her answer changed everything. She told me not to confront him, not to let him know I knew. We needed to build a case so airtight that he couldn't talk his way out of it. She'd seen too many situations like this fall apart because the victim acted on emotion instead of strategy. I'd spent my career making strategic decisions. Now I'd make the most important one of my life. That night, I went home and cooked dinner like always. Caleb kissed my cheek when he walked in at 6:15, his usual time. He smelled like my lavender body wash. I smiled and asked about his day while Mia set the table, moving slowly like she was still shaking off the fog of those pills. He told me about a difficult client and a delayed shipment, the same kind of work stories he'd been telling me for a decade. I nodded in all the right places, laughed at his joke about the foreman, and served him the pasta he loved. I didn't tell him that I knew he was a monster. Not yet. Rebecca's instructions were clear. We needed more than one video and a bottle of pills. We needed a pattern that proved intent, showed repetition, demonstrated that this wasn't some terrible mistake, but a calculated routine. I started documenting everything. Our shared bank account showed regular cash withdrawals of $300 every Thursday for the past 4 months. Always the same amount, always the same day. I screenshotted every transaction and sent them to Rebecca's encrypted email. Then I found the credit card I didn't know existed. I was looking for our insurance documents in Caleb's home office when I found a statement tucked inside a folder marked Equipment Rentals. The card was in his name, but sent to a P.O. box I'd never heard of. The charges painted a picture I wished I could unsee. Hotel rooms in downtown Portland, restaurants I'd never been to. A jewelry store purchase for $2,000 that I definitely never received. But the one that made my stomach drop was from 3 months ago. A pharmacy in Beaverton. The amount matched the street price for the type of benzodiazepines Dr. Bennett had identified. He'd bought them specifically for this. This wasn't him being manipulated by some young woman who had the pills already. He'd gone to a sketchy pharmacy and purchased them knowing exactly what he planned to do with them. I photographed every page of that statement, and 4 months of previous ones I found in the same folder. My hands shook so badly I had to retake several photos to make sure they were clear enough to read. The next discovery came from Mia herself, though she didn't know she was helping me build a case against her own father. I sat with her one evening, after Caleb left for his Thursday night poker game, that I now knew was something else entirely. I asked her gently about the vitamins, keeping my voice light and curious, like we were just chatting about her day. She told me the lady had been coming for almost 5 months now, always on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always when I was at work. She seemed nice at first, bringing Mia cookies and asking about school. The vitamins started about 3 months ago. The lady said they'd help Mia focus better on her homework, and that lots of kids took them. Mia admitted she didn't like how they made her feel, heavy and disconnected, like she was watching herself from far away. But Daddy said it was important, that it would help her grades improve. And she wanted to make him proud. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to cry where she couldn't see me. 5 months of this. 5 months of them using my child's trust and love to facilitate their affair. 5 months of sedating an 11-year-old girl so they could have sex in her mother's bed while she slept downstairs. Rebecca advised me that we had enough to go to the police now, but she wanted one more piece of evidence. She wanted them caught in the act with law enforcement as witnesses. No room for Caleb to claim it was a misunderstanding, or that the videos were edited or taken out of context. The police detective Rebecca connected me with was a woman named Sarah Park, who worked in the Crimes Against Children unit. She listened to my story in a small interview room at the precinct, her expression growing harder with each detail I shared. She watched the videos I'd collected, 3 of them now, showing the same pattern. Caleb arriving early with Sabrina. That was her name. I'd learned from going through his phone while he showered. Mia taking the pill. Both of them waiting for her to fall asleep before disappearing upstairs. Detective Park asked me questions I'd already asked myself. Was I certain about what I was seeing? Was there any possibility of misinterpretation? Did I understand that once we moved forward with this, there was no going back? I understood. There was no version of this reality where I could unsee what I knew. No amount of therapy or time would make me forget that my husband had drugged our daughter to sleep with his girlfriend in our home. We planned the operation for the following Thursday. I'd go to work as usual. The police would be positioned in unmarked vehicles nearby. I'd watch the camera feed from my office and alert them the moment Sabrina administered the pill to Mia. The hardest part was preparing Mia without terrifying her. Detective Park and a child psychologist helped me find the right words. I told her that the vitamins weren't actually vitamins, that they were making her sick instead of helping her, that some grown-ups make very bad choices, and we needed to help other kids be safe. I asked her if she'd be brave enough to take one more pill if I promised it was the last time, and that I'd be watching to keep her safe. My brilliant, trusting daughter looked up at me with those big eyes and asked if she was helping catch bad guys like in the movies. I told her, yes, baby. Exactly like that. Thursday morning arrived. I kissed Caleb goodbye like always. Told him I loved him because that's what you say, even when the words taste like poison. I drove to my office in downtown Portland and sat at my desk with my phone in my hand. At 2 o'clock, Detective Park texted me. They were in position. At 2:12, my screen showed Caleb's car pulling into our driveway. Sabrina got out of the passenger seat. She'd driven there with him this time, cocky enough now to not even hide. I watched them enter my house. Watched Mia come downstairs. Watched Sabrina reach into her designer purse and pull out that familiar pill bottle. My daughter looked directly at the camera for just a second, so briefly that Caleb and Sabrina didn't notice. Then she turned to Sabrina with a small smile and held out her hand. I told the woman on the phone to go. I watched it all happen through my phone screen from 30 miles away, sitting in my office chair with Detective Park on speakerphone, narrating what I was seeing. Sabrina dropped the pill into Mia's palm. My daughter swallowed it with the water Caleb handed her, just like she'd done dozens of times before. Except this time, she didn't actually swallow. Mia had practiced with me the night before, tucking the pill into her cheek, taking a big drink to make it look real. The moment Sabrina turned away, Mia spit the pill into a tissue Detective Park had given her, wrapped it up, and tucked it into her pocket like we'd rehearsed. Then she sat on the couch and pretended to get drowsy, letting her eyes drift closed. Caleb checked his watch. Sabrina poured wine. They were so confident, so comfortable in their routine that they didn't notice the small inconsistencies. That Mia's breathing wasn't quite as deep as usual. That she shifted position slightly when a genuinely sedated child wouldn't have moved at all. Through my phone, I saw Caleb lean down and shake Mia's shoulder gently. She stayed limp, playing her role perfectly. He nodded to Sabrina. They started toward the stairs. That's when Detective Park gave the signal. I heard it through my phone's audio first. The heavy knock on the door. Caleb's voice, confused and irritated, asking who it was. The sound of the door opening. Then everything happened at once. 3 police officers entered my living room. Caleb stumbled backward, his wine glass falling and shattering on the hardwood floor I'd refinished last summer. Sabrina froze on the 3rd step of the staircase, her hand gripping the railing so hard her knuckles went white. Detective Park's voice was clear and professional as she stated why they were there. The investigation into child endangerment, the evidence of administering controlled substances to a minor, the pattern of behavior documented over multiple incidents. I watched Caleb's face cycle through emotions faster than I could catalog them. Confusion, anger, then panic. He started talking immediately, his words tumbling over each other. It wasn't what it looked like. Those weren't real drugs. He thought they were just melatonin or something to help Mia sleep. Sabrina told him they were herbal supplements. Sabrina's head snapped toward him, her expression shifting from fear to fury. She opened her mouth to contradict him, to save herself by throwing him under the bus, but Detective Park cut her off. She was reading them their rights. Mia sat up on the couch slowly, just like we'd planned. A female officer who'd been stationed at the back door came in and went straight to her, kneeling down to Mia's level and speaking quietly. My daughter pulled the tissue with the pill from her pocket and handed it over. Physical evidence. Caught in the act. No way to claim misunderstanding. I watched them handcuff Sabrina first. She was crying, mascara running down her face, saying she didn't know it was illegal, that Caleb told her it was fine, that she'd just been trying to help. When they turned to Caleb, he looked directly at the camera. For a moment, I thought he'd figured it out, that he knew I was watching. But his expression wasn't angry or betrayed. It was pleading. He was looking at the camera, hoping I'd come home and fix this for him. Save him like I'd saved us from every crisis in our marriage. The time he lost his job and I covered our mortgage for 6 months. When his mother got sick and I arranged all her care. When he forgot to file our taxes and I spent weeks untangling the mess. He genuinely believed I'd show up and make this okay too. I ended the video feed and put my phone face down on my desk. Rebecca texted me 10 minutes later. They'd been taken to the precinct for booking. Mia was safe with the child advocate officer and asking when I'd get there. The house was being photographed as a crime scene, but I'd have access by evening. I texted back asking what came next. Her reply was a list. Emergency custody hearing tomorrow. Restraining order filed within the hour. Divorce papers ready for my signature. She'd handle everything. I just needed to take care of Mia. I drove home in afternoon traffic, my mind strangely quiet. No music on the radio, no phone calls. Just me and the highway and the reality that my marriage had ended with handcuffs and Miranda rights. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. Same blue door Caleb had painted last spring, same flower boxes I'd planted with tulips that were just starting to bloom. But there was police tape across the entrance and an officer standing guard. Detective Park met me there. She walked me through what happened after I stopped watching. How Caleb had tried to resist until one of the officers told him he was making it worse. How Sabrina had asked if she could call her parents. How Mia had been calm and brave through all of it. The officer handed me Mia's backpack and told me my daughter was waiting at the precinct victim services room with hot chocolate and a therapy dog named Murphy. They wanted me to take her to her pediatrician for a full medical evaluation, just to document everything officially. I asked what would happen to Caleb and Sabrina. Detective Park's expression was grim. With the evidence we had, they'd both be charged with child endangerment at minimum. The DA was reviewing whether to add charges for administering controlled substances to a minor. Depending on the forensic analysis of the pills and Mia's medical records, this could be serious prison time, especially for Caleb, since he was her father. The betrayal of parental duty made it worse. I drove to the precinct and found my daughter sitting on a blue couch with a golden retriever's head in her lap. She looked up when I walked in, and her face crumpled. I caught her as she ran to me, holding her while she cried into my shirt. She asked if she did good, if she helped catch the bad guys. I told her she was the bravest person I'd ever known. That night, we stayed in a hotel near the airport. I couldn't face going back to that house yet, walking past the spot where my husband had been arrested, seeing the broken wine glass probably still on my floor. We ordered room service pizza and watched animated movies on the hotel TV. Mia fell asleep around 9, curled up next to me with her head on my shoulder. I stayed awake much longer, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the small white pills that had destroyed everything. But they'd also saved us. If Mia hadn't asked that question in the kitchen, if she hadn't been brave enough to tell me what was happening, we might have lived in that lie for years. Those pills had revealed the truth that needed to come out. Tomorrow we'd deal with custody hearings and medical evaluations and giving statements to the district attorney. Tomorrow I'd have to figure out how to explain to Mia why her father did what he did. Tonight, I just held my daughter and promised her that no one would ever hurt her like that again. The custody hearing took less than an hour. Caleb appeared via video conference from the detention center, wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed too big for him. He'd lost weight already, or maybe he'd always looked this small and I'd just never noticed before. His lawyer argued that he'd been deceived by Sabrina, that he genuinely believed the pills were harmless supplements, that he was a loving father who'd made a terrible mistake in judgment. The judge listened with an expression that gave nothing away. Then it was Rebecca's turn. She presented the credit card statements, showing Caleb had purchased the benzodiazepines himself. The pharmacy records proving he'd picked them up with a fake prescription 3 months before Sabrina even entered the picture. Text messages recovered from his phone where he'd told Sabrina exactly when to come over and how long the pills would keep Mia asleep. The fake prescription was news to me. I watched the color drain from Caleb's face on the video screen as Rebecca entered it into evidence. He'd forged a doctor's signature to get those pills. This wasn't negligence or naivety. This was premeditated. The judge awarded me full physical and legal custody. Caleb was granted supervised visitation only, contingent on completion of a parenting evaluation and substance abuse assessment. He'd have to petition the court in 6 months if he wanted to change the arrangement. He didn't even look at the camera when the judge read the decision. Just stared down at his hands like he could will himself to disappear. Afterward, Rebecca and I sat in her office downtown, while Mia was at her first therapy appointment 2 floors up. The therapist specialized in children who'd experienced trauma from trusted adults. She'd decorated her office with soft lighting and comfortable beanbag chairs, trying to make it feel less clinical. Rebecca told me the divorce would be straightforward under the circumstances. Oregon's no-fault divorce laws meant we didn't have to prove abuse or abandonment, but his criminal charges would impact the asset division. The house was in my name only, bought before we married with my inheritance from my grandmother. He had no claim to it. But the retirement accounts we'd built together, the investment portfolio I'd carefully managed for 10 years, the savings bonds we'd bought for Mia's college fund, all of that would be divided unless I could demonstrate that his actions constituted financial abuse or marital waste. Marital waste. The legal term for spending marital assets on an extramarital affair. Rebecca pulled up the credit card statements again. 2 years of charges to hotels, restaurants, gifts. The pattern started long before Sabrina. There'd been others. Maybe many others. Each transaction a little theft from our shared future. She calculated quickly on her laptop. Roughly $85,000 spent on affairs over 2 years. Money that should have gone to Mia's college fund, our retirement, the kitchen renovation I'd been planning. I signed the papers authorizing her to file a claim for full reimbursement of marital waste. Whatever assets Caleb had left after legal fees would be liquidated to pay me back. His truck, his tools, his motorcycle he'd bought last summer. All of it would be sold. He'd walk away from this marriage with nothing but debt and criminal charges. The criminal case moved forward faster than I expected. The DA assigned to prosecute was a woman named Jennifer Torres, who had a reputation for being aggressive with child endangerment cases. She called me directly 2 weeks after the arrest to walk me through what would happen next. Caleb and Sabrina were both facing multiple felony charges: child endangerment, administering controlled substances to a minor, and for Caleb specifically, obtaining prescription medication through fraudulent means. If convicted on all counts, he could face up to 10 years in prison. Sabrina was already negotiating a plea deal. Her lawyer wanted her to testify against Caleb in exchange for reduced charges. She'd admit to administering the pills, but claim Caleb had told her they were legal supplements and that she'd been deceived about their nature. Jennifer asked if I wanted her to agree to the plea deal. It would guarantee Sabrina faced consequences, but might make Caleb's conviction easier if she testified about his planning and manipulation. I thought about Sabrina's face on that camera footage. The casual way she'd checked Mia's pulse, the smile she'd given Caleb before they went upstairs, how she'd moved through my house like she owned it. I told Jennifer to make Sabrina testify, put her on the stand and make her admit every detail. The DA agreed. The plea deal was finalized a week later. Sabrina would plead guilty to child endangerment and serve 18 months, with credit for time served and early release for good behavior. She'd have it on her record forever, making it nearly impossible to work with children or in healthcare or education. But most importantly, she'd testify at Caleb's trial. While the legal machinery ground forward, I focused on building a new life for Mia and myself. We couldn't stay in that house. Every room held memories I couldn't scrub away. The living room where she'd been drugged, the stairs they'd climbed, the bedroom I'd shared with a man I'd never really known. I listed it for sale and started looking for something new. A fresh start in a neighborhood where no one knew our story. I found a townhouse in Beaverton, near good schools and parks, with a small backyard, perfect for the dog I'd promised Mia we'd get once we settled. The house sold in 3 days, well over asking price. Portland's real estate market was insane, but for once that worked in my favor. After paying off the remaining mortgage and covering Rebecca's fees, I had enough for a down payment on the townhouse and 6 months of expenses saved. Caleb had been released on bail by then, living with his brother in Gresham and wearing an ankle monitor. His lawyer had convinced the judge he wasn't a flight risk, though the conditions of his release were strict. No contact with Mia, no access to controlled substances, weekly check-ins with a probation officer. I saw him once during this period, completely by accident. I was at the grocery store in my neighborhood, picking up snacks for Mia's class party, when I turned the corner and found him standing in the cereal aisle. We stared at each other for a long moment. He looked terrible. Unshaven, wearing the same jacket he'd worn to our wedding 10 years ago that didn't fit him right anymore. His eyes were hollow. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something. Maybe to apologize, maybe to try to explain. I turned and walked away before any words could come out. I didn't need his explanations. I'd lived with his lies for long enough. The trial date was set for October, 4 months away. Jennifer warned me it would be difficult. I'd have to testify about finding the pills, about what I'd seen on the camera footage. Mia would be spared from testifying directly, but her forensic interview would be played for the jury. I'd have to sit in that courtroom and listen to defense attorneys try to paint Caleb as a victim of circumstance, a good man who made a mistake, a father who'd been manipulated by a younger woman. But I'd also get to sit there while the prosecutor showed the jury those credit card statements, the fake prescription, the text messages planning exactly when and how to drug our daughter so he could cheat in peace. The jury would see what he really was. In the meantime, Mia was healing. The therapy helped more than I'd expected. She talked about feeling safer now, understanding that the foggy afternoons weren't her fault, that good parents don't make their children keep scary secrets. Her grades improved once the drugs were out of her system. She made new friends at her new school. She laughed again, real laughter that reached her eyes. We adopted a dog from the shelter in May, Buster, a golden retriever mix with a tail that never stopped wagging. He slept at the foot of Mia's bed every night and followed her around the townhouse like a devoted shadow. I'd thought the pills destroyed everything. But watching Mia throw a ball for Buster in our new backyard, hearing her giggle when he knocked her over with enthusiastic licks, I realized they'd actually revealed what needed to be revealed. The foundation we'd built our life on was rotten. Better to tear it down and start fresh than to keep building on a lie. The truth had set us free. It just hurt like hell to get there. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in August. Jennifer Torres's name lit up my phone screen while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my desk. I stepped into an empty conference room to take it. She told me Caleb's trial date had been moved up. His lawyer had requested an earlier slot, probably hoping that less preparation time would work in their favor. We'd go to trial in 3 weeks. But that wasn't why she was calling. She'd discovered something new while preparing her case, something that changed the scope of what Caleb had done. Sabrina wasn't the first. Jennifer had subpoenaed Caleb's phone records going back 3 years. She'd found a pattern of contact with multiple women, many of whom he'd met through his construction projects. Wealthy clients, subcontractors' wives, the architect on his hospital renovation project. One of them agreed to speak with Jennifer. Her name was Rachel Montgomery. She'd hired Caleb's company to renovate her home in Lake Oswego 2 years ago. They'd started an affair that lasted 8 months. Rachel had a daughter, too, Ella, who was 7 at the time. Jennifer asked if I could meet with Rachel. She wanted us to talk before the trial, to see if Rachel's testimony could establish a pattern of behavior beyond just Sabrina. I met Rachel at a coffee shop in West Lynn on Saturday morning. She looked like me, I realized as soon as she sat down. Professional, put together, the kind of woman who manages both career and family without ever appearing to break a sweat. We could have been friends in another life. She told me her story in a quiet voice that barely carried over the espresso machine noise. Caleb had been charming during the renovation, attentive to her ideas, always staying late to discuss design changes. Her husband traveled frequently for work. She was lonely. The affair started 3 months into the project. Caleb would come over in the afternoons when Ella was home from school. He told Rachel he needed to take measurements, check on completed work, supervise subcontractors. Ella started having trouble sleeping. Terrible nightmares, unexplained headaches, falling asleep at random times during the day. Rachel took her to multiple doctors who found nothing wrong. It wasn't until months after the affair ended and the renovation was complete that Rachel discovered what had really been happening. Ella finally told her that Mr. Caleb, the nice construction man, had given her special medicine to help her rest better so she wouldn't interrupt him and Mommy's important work meetings. Rachel's hands shook as she showed me photos on her phone. Pills identical to the ones Mia had taken. Same generic white container. No label. She'd had them analyzed after Ella's confession. Benzodiazepines, just like Mia's. But Rachel hadn't gone to the police. Her husband didn't know about the affair. If this came out, her marriage would be destroyed. The shame and guilt of what she'd allowed to happen to her own daughter kept her silent. Until Jennifer called. Until she realized Caleb had done it again. That another child had been drugged while he pursued another married woman. Rachel asked me if Mia was okay, if therapy was helping, if I'd ever forgive myself for not seeing it sooner. I told her the same thing I told myself every night. We can't blame ourselves for trusting someone we loved. That's what trust means. The blame belongs entirely to the person who weaponized that trust. She cried then, right there in the coffee shop. I held her hand across the table while strangers pretended not to notice. Jennifer called that evening to confirm Rachel would testify. With her testimony, the prosecution could show the jury this wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was Caleb's method. Find a lonely married woman, start an affair, drug her child into compliance, maintain the secret until he got bored and moved on. The trial preparation intensified. Jennifer wanted me ready for every question the defense might ask. Why didn't I notice sooner? Had our marriage been troubled before? Did I have any reason to suspect Caleb of infidelity? I practiced my answers until they were steady and sure. I'd trusted my husband because that's what marriage asks of you. I'd been working long hours to provide for our family. I'd had no reason to suspect the man I loved was capable of this. The defense would try to paint me as negligent, a mother too focused on her career to notice what was happening to her child. Jennifer prepared me for that too. The counter was simple. I was providing for my family while my husband was committing felonies. Those are not equivalent failures. Mia's therapist prepared a report for the court about the long-term impact of what Caleb had done, the betrayal of trust from a parent figure, the violation of bodily autonomy, the confusion of being drugged without understanding why. All of it would have lasting effects on Mia's ability to trust adults and authority figures. But the therapist also documented Mia's resilience, her bravery in telling me what was happening, her courage in helping law enforcement, her steady healing over the past months. She was going to be okay. It would take time and work, but she was going to be okay. 2 weeks before trial, I got a call from Caleb's lawyer. He wanted to discuss a plea deal. Caleb would plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence recommendation, 12 years instead of the potential 20 he faced if convicted at trial. I told the lawyer I'd think about it. Then I called Jennifer. She laid out the options clinically. A plea deal guaranteed Caleb faced consequences, no risk of an acquittal. But it also meant he'd likely serve less time with good behavior, maybe 8 years before parole eligibility. A trial was riskier. Juries were unpredictable, but if we won, the judge could impose the maximum sentence, 20 years. Caleb would be in his 50s before he got out. She asked what I wanted to do. I thought about Mia, sleeping peacefully in her room with Buster at her feet, about Rachel and Ella and whoever else Caleb might have hurt that we didn't know about yet, about the future children he could victimize if he got out too soon. I told Jennifer to reject the plea deal. We'd go to trial. That night, I sat in my new living room with a glass of wine and looked at the life I'd rebuilt. The townhouse that was just ours. No ghosts in the walls. The job I'd kept despite everything, earning enough to provide the stability Mia needed. The future that stretched ahead of us, uncertain but free. The pills had revealed the monster hiding in my marriage. Now the trial would show everyone else what I'd already learned. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep buried. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I'd seen enough legal dramas to imagine soaring ceilings and dark wood paneling, but this was just a regular room with fluorescent lights and industrial carpet. Caleb sat at the defense table in a suit I didn't recognize, probably borrowed from his brother. He didn't look at me when I entered. The jury selection had taken 2 days. Jennifer wanted parents who'd understand the violation. Caleb's lawyer wanted anyone who might sympathize with a man who'd made mistakes, but wasn't truly evil. They settled on 12 people who looked tired and vaguely uncomfortable, just like everyone else forced to participate in the justice system. Jennifer's opening statement was devastating. She walked the jury through everything chronologically. The credit card charges proving Caleb had funded multiple affairs with marital assets, the fake prescription showing premeditation, the camera footage that would make them watch him drug his own daughter, Rachel's testimony that would prove this was his pattern. Caleb's lawyer countered that his client had been manipulated by younger women, that he'd believed the pills were harmless, that he was guilty of infidelity and poor judgment, but not of intentionally harming children, that he was a loving father who'd made terrible choices under the influence of his affairs. The first witness was Dr. Bennett, who explained the effects of benzodiazepines on children, the respiratory depression, the cognitive impairment, the risks of dependency. She testified that no legitimate doctor would prescribe these to an 11-year-old and that the doses Mia had been given were dangerous. The pharmacy technician testified next, confirming that Caleb had presented a prescription for the pills that the pharmacy system later flagged as fraudulent. They'd reported it to the medical board, but by then Caleb had already received 3 refills. Detective Park walked the jury through the investigation. The camera footage was played on large monitors positioned so the jury couldn't avoid watching. I saw several jurors' expressions change as they watched Sabrina hand Mia the pill, watched my daughter swallow it obediently, watched her eyes grow heavy and her head droop. When the video showed Caleb checking Mia's pulse before leading Sabrina upstairs, one juror covered her mouth. I testified on the 3rd day. Jennifer had prepared me well, but nothing quite readies you for sitting in a witness box while lawyers pick apart your life. I walked through finding the pills, installing the camera, watching my husband drug our daughter to facilitate his affair. Caleb's lawyer cross-examined me for 2 hours. Wasn't it true that I worked long hours? That I'd sometimes missed Mia's school events? That Caleb had been the primary caregiver in the afternoons? I answered each question steadily. Yes, I worked to provide for our family. Yes, I'd occasionally missed events because someone had to pay for our life. Yes, Caleb had picked Mia up from school, which I'd trusted him to do because I believed he was her father, not her abuser. The lawyer asked if I'd considered that Caleb might have genuinely believed the pills were safe, if I'd ever had conversations with him about herbal supplements or sleep aids for Mia. I looked directly at Caleb for the first time since the trial started. He met my eyes for a moment before looking away. No, I told the lawyer. We'd never discussed drugging our daughter so he could cheat on me. That particular conversation had never come up. Rachel testified on the 4th day. She told her story with quiet dignity, admitting the affair, explaining how she'd discovered what Caleb had done to Ella. Caleb's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggesting she was a scorned ex-lover seeking revenge. Jennifer objected, reminding the judge that Rachel had come forward at great personal cost, including the potential destruction of her own marriage. Her testimony wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting other children from a predator. The word hung in the courtroom. Predator. That's what Caleb was. A man who systematically drugged children to facilitate his affairs. Who targeted lonely married women with daughters. Who developed a system and refined it over years. Sabrina testified on the 5th day, part of her plea agreement. She admitted to administering the pills to Mia, but maintained that Caleb had told her they were herbal supplements, that she'd been young and naive and trusted him. The prosecution presented text messages that contradicted her testimony. Messages where Sabrina asked Caleb how long the pills would keep Mia asleep, where she complained that the dose wasn't strong enough one afternoon and Mia had woken up early, where she'd specifically referenced the pills as benzos. She'd known. She'd always known. The defense called character witnesses. Caleb's brother testified that he'd always been a good father, involved in Mia's life, coaching her soccer team. Former co-workers said he was reliable and honest. His mother cried on the stand, insisting her son wasn't a monster. But Jennifer's cross-examination revealed the gaps. When was the last time they'd been to our home? Had they ever been present on Tuesday or Thursday afternoons? Could they account for Caleb's whereabouts during the times in question? They couldn't. They'd only seen the persona Caleb wanted them to see. The closing arguments happened on a Friday. Jennifer reminded the jury of every piece of evidence. The pharmacy records, the camera footage, the text messages, Rachel's testimony establishing a pattern. She asked them to consider what kind of father drugs his own child. What kind of man prioritizes his sexual gratification over his daughter's safety? Caleb's lawyer made one last attempt to frame this as a good man who'd fallen under bad influences and made terrible mistakes. That he deserved punishment, yes, but also compassion and the possibility of redemption. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom with Jennifer and Rebecca, drinking bad coffee from the vending machine, and trying not to think about what would happen if they acquitted him. When the bailiff finally called us back in, my hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together to keep them still. The jury forewoman was a middle-aged black woman who'd taken extensive notes throughout the trial. She stood and read the verdict in a clear, steady voice. Count 1, child endangerment, guilty. Count 2, administering controlled substances to a minor, guilty. Count 3, obtaining prescription medication through fraud, guilty. Count 4, assault, guilty. Each guilty verdict hit like a hammer blow. I watched Caleb's shoulders slump further with each one. His lawyer put a hand on his arm, but Caleb shook it off. The judge scheduled sentencing for 4 weeks later, but remanded Caleb to custody immediately. His bail was revoked. As the deputies approached to take him away, he finally turned and looked at me. I don't know what he expected to see. Forgiveness, maybe. Satisfaction. Some acknowledgement of what we'd once meant to each other. I looked back at him with nothing. No anger, no sadness, no relief. Just emptiness, where a decade of trust had been incinerated. They let him out through a side door. I'd never see him again except through the glass partition at the prison if I chose to visit, which I wouldn't. Jennifer hugged me in the hallway. Rebecca promised to finalize the divorce papers now that the criminal case was resolved. Strangers who'd sat through the trial stopped me to say they were sorry, that they hoped Mia would be okay, that I was brave. I drove home to my townhouse where Mia was having a playdate with her new friend Sophia. They were in the backyard with Buster, laughing at something I couldn't hear through the window. Normal kid stuff, oblivious to courtrooms and verdicts and the fact that her father was now a convicted felon. That night, after Sophia's mom picked her up and Mia was in bed, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and looked at the stars. The same stars that had been there the night Mia asked about those pills, the night my world tilted off its axis. The pills had destroyed my marriage, sent my husband to prison, cost me countless hours of sleep and sanity, but they'd also saved my daughter, revealed the truth before Caleb could do even more damage, given us the evidence we needed to ensure he faced consequences. Sometimes poison is also medicine. It just depends on how you use it. Caleb's sentencing happened on a cold morning in November. The judge gave him 18 years with the possibility of parole after 12. He'd be nearly 60 when he got out. Mia would be in her 20s, hopefully with a life so full and bright that her father's release would barely register. I didn't attend the sentencing. Rebecca went on my behalf and reported back that Caleb had made a statement apologizing to Mia, to me, to Rachel, and Ella. That he took full responsibility for his actions and understood the harm he'd caused. I didn't care about his apologies. They didn't change anything. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later. I got everything. The house had already sold, the proceeds in my account. His retirement fund was liquidated to repay the marital waste, giving me back most of what he'd spent on his affairs. His truck and tools were sold to cover his legal fees. He'd have nothing when he got out except debt and a criminal record. Mia asked about him sometimes. Where he was. If he was okay. If she'd done something wrong to make him go away. Her therapist helped me find the right words. Daddy made very bad choices that hurt you. He's facing consequences for those choices. None of this is your fault. You were brave and strong, and you helped keep other kids safe. She seemed to accept that. Children are remarkably resilient when you give them the truth in doses they can handle. We settled into our new life. The townhouse became home. Mia thrived at her new school, joining the art club and making friends who didn't know anything about her father or the trial. She still saw her therapist every other week, but the appointments focused more on building coping skills and less on processing trauma. I threw myself into work, earning a promotion to senior financial analyst that came with a raise I immediately put toward Mia's college fund. The fund Caleb had stolen from with his credit card charges for hotel rooms and jewelry, that wasn't for me. I'd rebuild it bigger and better than before. Buster became the center of our household, as dogs do. He needed walks twice a day, which forced me to take breaks from work and actually breathe fresh air. Mia taught him tricks, patient and persistent, until he mastered sit and stay and roll over. Watching her laugh when he successfully caught treats in his mouth, I saw the girl she'd been before the pills and felt grateful we'd found our way back. Spring came early that year. The cherry trees in our neighborhood bloomed in late March, turning every street pink and white. I took Mia to the Japanese garden in Washington Park, where we walked through the gates and forgot about courtrooms and pills and everything that had tried to break us. I was throwing a ball for Buster in Laurelhurst Park on a Saturday in May, when our leashes tangled with another dog walker's. The other dog was a husky with striking blue eyes and a tail that wouldn't stop wagging. Her owner was a man about my age with kind eyes and an apologetic smile. He helped me untangle the leashes while both dogs tried to play and investigate each other simultaneously. His name was Ethan. The husky was Sky. They lived a few blocks away and came to this park every weekend. We started running into each other regularly. Purely coincidental at first, or so I told myself. But then, I started coming to the park around the same time I knew he'd be there. And he smiled when he saw me in a way that suggested his timing wasn't coincidental either. We graduated from dog park small talk to coffee dates at the cafe near the park entrance. He was a graphic designer who'd moved to Portland from Seattle 2 years ago. Divorced. No kids. Owned a house he was slowly renovating himself. He asked about my life, and I found myself telling him the simplified version. Divorced, 1 daughter. Recently moved to the area for a fresh start. He didn't push for details. Just listened and asked thoughtful questions, and made me laugh with stories about Sky's various attempts to befriend neighborhood cats who wanted nothing to do with her. Mia met him by accident 3 months into whatever we were calling this. She and I were at the park when Ethan arrived with Sky. The dogs bounded toward each other like old friends. Mia looked up at me with curious eyes. Recognizing something in my expression I thought I'd hidden better. Ethan crouched down to Mia's level and asked if she wanted to help him teach Sky a new trick. They spent the next hour working on getting Sky to shake hands, Mia giggling every time the husky offered the wrong paw or forgot halfway through and tried to lick her face instead. I watched them together and felt something unfamiliar. Hope, maybe. The possibility that life could hold good things again. We took it slow. Months of coffee dates and dog walks before we attempted dinner without the dogs as buffers. More months before I invited him to the townhouse for a home-cooked meal. He noticed Mia's artwork on the fridge, complimented her use of color, asked if he could commission a piece for his office. She drew him a portrait of Sky surrounded by snowflakes and hearts. He had it professionally framed. A year after the trial, Mia and I went to visit Rachel and Ella. They'd moved to Bend after Rachel's marriage survived the revelation of her affair. We met at a park where the girls could play, while Rachel and I talked on a nearby bench. Ella had been in therapy too. She was doing better, Rachel said. Still had some trust issues with men, but her therapist said that was normal and manageable. She'd grown 3 inches and lost her front teeth, looking so much older than the 7-year-old in the photos Rachel had shown me. We watched our daughters on the playground, 2 kids who'd survived something terrible and were finding their way back to normal. Rachel asked if I'd forgiven myself yet for not seeing the truth sooner. I told her I was working on it, that some days were better than others, that I was trying to focus on what I did right, getting us out, rather than what I missed while we were in it. She squeezed my hand. We were survivors of the same trauma, bonded by the shared experience of loving men who used our children as collateral damage in their affairs. But we were also more than that. We were women rebuilding lives and raising daughters who would grow up knowing their mothers fought for them. That sometimes the hardest choice is the right one. Ethan asked me to dinner on the anniversary of the day our leashes first tangled. A real date at a restaurant downtown, where we didn't have to wrangle dogs or keep an eye on Mia. I wore a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, deep green with a flattering cut. He told me over dessert that he was falling in love with me, that he knew my past was complicated, and I had every reason to be cautious, that he didn't want to rush me but thought I should know where his heart was heading. I told him I was scared, that the last time I trusted a man completely, he'd drugged my daughter, that I didn't know if I could give anyone that kind of faith again. He said he understood, that we could take all the time I needed, that he wasn't going anywhere. 2 years after the trial, Mia asked if Ethan could come to her birthday party. Not as my date, but as her friend. She wanted him there to see her blow out the candles on the cake I'd spent all morning decorating. He came with a present wrapped in paper Mia had helped him choose. A set of professional art supplies, the kind serious artists use. She hugged him spontaneously, the first time I'd seen her initiate physical affection with an adult man since the trial. That night, after the party ended and Mia was asleep, I sat on the porch with Ethan. He asked if I'd ever heard from Caleb. I told him no. That I'd moved and changed my number and had no desire for contact. That as far as I was concerned, Caleb's story ended in that courtroom. Ethan reached for my hand, asked if I was ready for a new story to begin. I looked at the life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage, the townhouse that held only happy memories, the daughter who was healing and thriving, the job I loved, the friends I'd made, the future that stretched ahead of us full of possibility instead of fear. I thought about those white pills that had destroyed everything, how they'd revealed the rot beneath the surface of my marriage, how the worst day of my life had also been the beginning of my liberation. Sometimes the truth is poison, but sometimes it's also medicine. I told Ethan yes, I was ready. The messages started coming in from the YouTube channel 3 months after the videos went live. Women from all over the country sharing their own stories. Husbands who drugged them to facilitate affairs. Partners who'd endangered children in pursuit of selfish desires. Stories that sounded too similar to mine to be coincidence. I started responding to them, sharing resources for legal help, therapist recommendations, the names of advocates who understood, reminding them that the trauma wasn't their fault, that loving someone doesn't make you responsible for their betrayal. Mia is 14 now. She's taller than me, with art portfolio good enough to earn attention from high school programs I can't afford, but will find a way to pay for anyway. She doesn't talk about Caleb much anymore. He's a fact of her history, not the defining feature of her life. Ethan moved in last year. We got married last month in a small ceremony in our backyard, just family and close friends. Mia was my maid of honor, standing beside me in the lavender dress she'd chosen herself. Sky and Buster wore matching bow ties as ring bearers. Sometimes I still think about those pills. The ones that broke my life open and showed me what was hiding inside. The ones that cost me years of sleep and trust, and the naive belief that love was enough to keep people honest. But those pills also gave me back my daughter, showed me I was strong enough to leave, led me eventually to a man who sees my scars and loves me anyway. I get messages asking if I regret not seeing the truth sooner, if I blame myself for what Caleb did. The answer is complicated. Yes, I wish I'd seen it. But abuse relies on trust. Caleb weaponized my faith in him, my exhaustion, my desire to believe the best of the person I'd married. I'm not responsible for his choices, only for what I did once I learned the truth. And what I did was fight. I documented everything, built a case, sent him to prison, rebuilt a life. I turned poison into medicine. That's the real story. If you're watching these videos from wherever you are in the world, if you're in a situation that feels wrong but you can't quite name it, trust that instinct. The truth is hard. The process of revealing it is harder. But living in a lie is hardest of all. Ask the questions. Look for the evidence. Believe your own eyes and heart. And if you find out something terrible, remember what I learned. You're stronger than you know. You can survive the truth. You can rebuild. There's life on the other side of the lie. A better life. One you choose for yourself. I chose freedom. I chose my daughter. I chose, eventually, to believe in love again. Those choices saved us. They can save you too. If you're listening from your city right now, drop a comment and let me know where you are. I love knowing this story reached you, wherever you're watching from. And if you want to follow more stories like this, subscribe to this channel. There are more truths that need telling. The pills revealed everything. But what we built afterward, that's all ours.